Richard Kelly's masterpiece, Donnie Darko, has left viewers stumped as to what it was all about for more than 2 decades. It is a complex sci-fi time travel story mixed in with a surreal horror flick. It is difficult to follow what is going on your first watch through, especially with all the complex movie-specific jargon employed such as living receiver and manipulated dead. But if you take it slowly again from the start, the conclusion is obvious. The movie opens with the sound of distant thunder and a dark shot, which quickly transitions to a peaceful bird chirping and sunrise over some unknown hills. We see a man lying in the middle of the road next to his bicycle. As the camera gets closer, we can see he is wearing pajamas. The man raises his head. He seems dazed and confused. After looking around and thinking for a bit, he turns towards the camera and smiles. As we will find out, this is Donnie, our protagonist. He tends to sleepwalk at night, often finding himself in weird places. This is such a common occurrence that when he makes his return, his family doesn't seem at all worried about his disappearance. Later, while his family is having dinner, we find out that Donnie goes to therapy and has to take pills of some sort. Pills which he has now stopped taking, much to the dislike of his mother. After an argument with her in his room, Donnie decides to take his pills that night. He clearly suffers from some condition. We don't know what it is yet, but neither do Donnie or his family. This makes him a possibly unreliable narrator. His interpretation of reality may differ from what the actual events were. That same night, Donnie walks out of his house in his sleep, but this time, it seems his eyes are open. We hear a voice beckoning him to
come closer.
We don't know how far he has walked for, but we can see he's at a golf course when he sees the rabbit. Or what appears to be a human in a freakish rabbit costume. The voice tells Donnie that in 28 days the world will end, to which he replies with a smirk. We return to his house, where a jet engine inexplicably falls through the roof right where his bed was. The rabbit had led Donnie to safety and saved his life. Nobody knows where the engine had come from. No planes were flying that night above their town. Donnie had somehow cheated death. Someone was watching over him. The next day at school, in English class, Donnie's teacher is reading to them Green's The Destructors, a short story about a gang of boys setting out to destroy a famous local house, driven by the pure, simple and altruistic ambition of fame for the gang. Of interest is the quote written on the board behind the teacher, taken from the last line of the story. One moment the house had stood there with such dignity between the bomb sites like a man in a top hat, and then bang, crash. There wasn't anything left, not anything. The parallels between the books discussed in the film and Donnie's life do not end here. Later, he vandalized his school and burnt one of the more famous houses in his town while sleepwalking, in much the same way the teenagers of the Destructors destroyed the old misery. The connection between the book and Donnie's activity results in his English teacher becoming suspended, as she is held partially responsible for the school's incident. But Donnie had actually committed these acts of destruction under the influence of the rabbit. We don't know what its goals are, but Donnie seems to be obeying it somewhat unwillingly, as evident by the spray in front of his school. The only thing we get in understanding Frank the Rabbit is from yet another book, this time one existing only in the universe of the movie, The Philosophy of Time Travel. It speaks about tangent universes, 4-dimensional breaks in our primary universe where time can be perceived and manipulated. Tangent universes are said to be unstable, being able to exist for only several weeks. Upon their collapse, a black hole would form in the primary universe, resulting in absolute destruction. This explains the rabbit's prediction. The tangent universe has formed, and after 4 weeks it will fall on itself and destroy the world. The rabbit is described as a manipulated dead, a person who has died in the tangent universe and must now guide a living receiver to return the artifact. An artifact is an object made of metal which must be returned to the original universe to safely close the tangent one. The living receiver is the one tasked with returning said object. This person will also be granted special powers such as telekinesis, mind control, and the ability to conjure fire and water. 2 things that we see Donnie do under the guide of Frank. Donnie seems at least somewhat aware of his actions. Though at first he may not realize he has done it, perhaps thinking that they were just dreams, we see him smile when he learns about the flooding at school, as well as later get nervous when it is his turn to show his writing to the police. When speaking to Gretchen, he admits to having committed arson several years prior, for which he is now going to therapy for. During his session with Dr. Thurman, he acknowledges the existence of the giant rabbit, calling it an imaginary friend. His doctor doesn't even seem surprised at this information. In fact, when Donnie said he made a new friend, she immediately questioned him if it were real or imaginary. Hence, we can infer that perhaps this is not the first imaginary being Donnie has interacted with. Sometime later, we see Donnie taking his pills again. After swallowing, he hears the rabbit's voice again. This suggests to us that whatever Frank is, it's not a product of Donnie's unstable condition. It is a being that possesses some form of supernatural abilities that has now gotten the protagonist to do its bidding. Darko asks him where did he come from, to which the rabbit responds with,
Do you believe in time travel?
just when Donnie's sister walks in and asks him,
Who are you talking to?
there is an audible snap as he returns back to reality. There is no 6-foot-tall rabbit in his bathroom. He is completely alone. Donnie and Frank's dialogue is cut together with a parent-teacher association meeting, which again reaffirms the striking similarity between the school incident and Graham's story, suggesting that whoever did it was perhaps influenced by it. A much more plausible explanation as to what is happening. A troubled kid, one that has had history of arson, had subconsciously been influenced by the story to commit the same acts of destruction. Few days later, Donnie speaks to his physics teacher about time travel. In theory, all one would require is a metal craft and a wormhole portal, two conditions previously met when the jet engine fell through Darko's house. This is when his teacher introduces him to the book A Philosophy of Time Travel, which explains many of the phenomena we have been seeing so far. When speaking to his therapist, Donnie seems convinced that Frank, the rabbit, has something to do with time travel and that he wants him to go speak to Roberta Sparrow, the author of said book. We have previously seen Roberta when she whispered in his ear,
She said that every living creature on Earth dies alone.
This has clearly greatly upset him. He is distraught at the idea of being alone. As such, it is quite plausible that he could have invented an imaginary figure, one possessing almost godlike abilities and knowledge which can navigate him and keep him company in his confusing life. In a subsequent session, his therapist asks him why does he continue to obey Frank's orders despite somewhat regretting his actions. Donnie admits that without Frank he would be left alone, unable to understand what the grand plan is. He gives her the book on philosophy of time travel, explaining how he has had experiences closely resembling those explained in the book. Experiences such as seeing the future path of a person in the form of a liquid extruding from their chest. He sees one coming from his chest and follows it up the stairs in his parents' bedroom to the closet where he finds a loaded gun. Time becomes less rigid. The fourth dimension reveals itself to Donnie. During a presentation at his school, at the mention of the name Frank, time begins speeding up, a phenomenon which only Darko seems to notice. His parents meet up with the therapist, which gives them her diagnosis. She believes Donnie is a paranoid schizophrenic, experiencing daylight hallucinations. He perceives adults as deceiving, manipulative, and even spying on him. In his last session with his therapist, he gets put under hypnosis as a way to treat his worsening schizophrenia. But during his sleep, Donnie, visibly distraught, gets up and explains to his doctor that if he doesn't follow what Frank wants, everyone will die as the sky will open up. The rabbit appears suddenly. Donnie falls to his knees and the doctor says something really out of the ordinary.
There would be no law. There would be no rule. There would only be you and your memories.
We cut to the rabbit, the puppet master. Interestingly, as she says, there will be no rule, we can hear a subtle reverb specifically for that phrase. His doctor is a manipulated living. She has to guide Donnie to his final objective as a living receiver. As their session ends, Dr. Thurman tells Darko that he can now stop taking his pills as they're just placebos. This muddles a bit our understanding of the movie. Indeed, Donnie may actually have schizophrenia and Frank may be just a visual hallucination. His pills wouldn't have helped him at all. Thus, the fact that he's now taking them every day doesn't amount to anything. Donnie takes out Gretchen on a date, but she quickly falls asleep in the empty theater. Just then, the rabbit appears. Donnie gets agitated that Frank is still wearing his mask and demands that he removes it. We see what hides under it, a young man, late teens, early 20s, who has been shot through the eye. He is a manipulated dead, someone who will die in this tangent universe and will be granted extraordinary fourth-dimensional powers to guide the living receiver on his quest. Later at night, Donnie's therapist calls his mother and asks her to call back as quickly as possible. We don't know what she wanted to speak about with his mother, but with the previous session ending so abruptly and the fact that she is calling at such a late hour, we may conclude that Dr. Thurman is incredibly worried for Donnie due to his worsening condition. Unfortunately, no one picks up as the Darko family is away on a trip and Donnie's sister is having a party at the house. After some alone time with Gretchen, he heads downstairs to join everyone, but suddenly he feels dizzy. An orb appears out of his chest, showing his future path. It leads him to the fridge where he reads a note. Frank was here, went to get beer, in the same handwriting that we saw the text, "They made me do it," in front of Donnie's school. With his friends, he rushes to Roberta Sparrow's house, the author of Philosophy of Time Travel, but finds it completely abandoned. Out of nowhere, Gretchen and him get jumped by two of the school bullies. She gets thrown on the road while Seth puts a knife to his neck. A car is seen in the distance. At first, Seth ignores it, but when it gets close, he gets scared it may be the cops. The car, trying to avoid Roberta Sparrow standing in the middle of the road, makes a sudden turn and runs over Gretchen. She lies still, unresponsive. The car door opens and out comes a man in a rabbit suit. It's Frank. But not the omnipotent being we have seen so far. This is just the human Frank. Donnie pulls out a gun and in rage shoots him through the eye. The prophecy has come true. Roberta tells Donnie that a storm is coming and goes back inside. We see him later in the same car with Gretchen in the passenger seat. He looks at her full of determination. The movie cuts to the plane which the rest of his family is currently flying on. A violent shake interrupts the peaceful scene which suggests that the plane will crash. The passengers may not survive. A single plane engine is seen flying through the vortex, the same one that fell through Donnie's room 28 days ago. Time reverses and we return to Donnie in his room before their home got destroyed. Richard Kelly's masterpiece Donnie Darko has left viewers stumped as to what it was all about for more than 2 decades. It is a complex sci-fi time travel story mixed in with a surreal horror flick. It is difficult to follow what is going on your first watch through, especially with all the complex movie-specific jargon employed, such as living receiver and manipulated dead. But if you take it slowly from the start, the conclusion is obvious. Donnie is a schizophrenic. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I make other similar video essay type things which you might enjoy as well. And if you could, please share this video as it greatly helps my channel. Thanks again for watching and now enjoy the last few seconds of silence as you reflect on your choices.